Well, welcome to the Burn Up Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Nugent, and I'm excited about today. This is someone that I've known literally his entire life. I'm one of two people, he and his mom, that have known him forever, and I love this young man so much, and I'm so excited to dive into a lot of different things today. You know, what it felt like from a son's perspective of watching me go through some pretty horrific things, going through divorce, and all the ins and outs of life. We're going to get real. We're going to get raw. We've got an incredible relationship, and we're going to talk about that. And from his perspective, why we have the relationship we have, and what it takes to have that relationship. And it's an honor and a pleasure to introduce all of you to my son, Dominic Nugent. Dominic, welcome to the Burn Up Podcast.
Why, thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, Dom, let's get real. We're going to dive into this fast. So probably the number one thing when I'm posting things on social or talking about things is the topic of divorce comes up. And you have friends that have gone through divorce, and then you being a child of a divorce. I mean, I think it's been, 7 years, give or take almost, since your mom and I got divorced. So if you can remember, let's go back. You're 22 now, and, so you were 15-ish at the time. What was that like before? Like, what was it watching your mom and I and seeing all the things play out before she and I decided to get divorced?
Well, I mean, I saw it coming from a mile away. So, I don't know, it was different. You were pretty checked out in a lot of areas. I just remember you sleeping up on the couch in the game room and walking up, seeing you there. It was just different. I didn't feel like you were as involved, or we weren't as involved. There's also the component of being younger and growing up, and there's more of that. So it's a combination of the two, I would say.
Who do you think struggled the most between? I mean, you're the oldest of four boys. Who do you think had the hardest time with the divorce?
Hudson,
our your youngest brother. Who Hudson's now 14. At the time was 7, and I would agree. Did you ever have conversations with any of your brothers behind the scenes around all of this?
A little bit. Nothing that really stood out. I think that we all were just taking care of it on our own, or on ourselves. I think mainly with Hudson, there were times like taking him to your house, he's just screaming and crying the entire time over. So just letting him know that we were all there with him also, and that he was going to be all right. Yeah.
There was a moment with your younger brother. I'll share this real quick. Yeah. He struggled with me. Was a mama's boy at the time, and still is in many ways, which I love. And again, I want to preface before we get into this, Dominic's mom and I are in a very good space. It took a minute to get there, but incredible co-parents, and we love our children very much. And also, divorce is hell. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. You mentioned your little brother. There was a moment where he came over and he's screaming and yelling to come, to back to his mom. And I had this moment where I just kind of held him on the couch, and he's screaming and yelling, and tears are streaming down my eyes. He finally, after, I don't know, it felt like an hour or two, fell asleep in my arms. I laid him into his bed. I went to bed crying, just, feeling so horrible about my kids going through this, and how can I show up differently? And what was interesting is the next morning I, woke up and didn't hear anything. And then I peeked my head into the room, and I didn't see him there. And he had a bunk bed at the time. And then all of a sudden he popped his head up above the bunk bed and goes, boo. And it was almost like a 180. And literally that moment shifted, it was as far as it was with our relationship with him. You mentioned that I was checked out. What did that feel like? Or was it just who I was, and you just like, it's my dad?
Well, yeah, at the time, looking back, it's more recognizable. So knowing now, going back and looking, I would for sure have a different perspective. It just is kind of, what it was. I remember moments where, I don't know, maybe wishing and wanting more presence, but not consciously choosing, like, yes, I want that. It's kind of going back and looking and realizing that I was feeling that or wanting that.
Yeah, you obviously have the benefit of hindsight now, right? And you're older now, and you're more wise, and you get it. And we've obviously had a lot of conversations around this. I talk a lot about this. I was checked out. I was physically there, but emotionally and mentally gone. And much of that was just a projection of what I was going through. I was at the time morbidly overweight, big Adam, 350 pounds, going through a divorce. And the reality is I didn't even want to be home. And the reason I didn't want to be home is, many things going on with your mom. But the truth of the matter, I wasn't happy with myself. and that got projected onto you, and I apologize for that.
Well, yeah, it's all right. It's okay. We've had lots of conversations around that. So
Yeah, it's interesting. And the irony in this whole situation, and I've shared this with you, my different situations, but when I was your age, when I was younger, my dad I felt very angry. I could never do enough, was always upset. Maybe you had some of these same feelings. And it was years later that I recognized and realized that, oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing to my kids that my dad did. And the pressure of being a husband, a father, a provider, and doing all the things. And my dad at the time struggled in his career. I mean, the stress was exhausting, and he didn't know what to do with it. And at the time didn't have the tools to be able to manage and regulate those emotions. And then it got projected onto me. So you as a kid, 15-year-old, 14, 13-year-old Dominic, obviously not knowing how to process it either, and my own lack of awareness around it. And it was just interesting that what I experienced as a kid, you experience. And I'm grateful for the work that I did and going to therapy and reading books and, just a lot of inward work, if you will. And I was actually with a coach. I think I've shared this with you. I was with a coach, and I don't remember what we were talking about. And I just broke down, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm being a martyr. My dad never intended to do this, because I carried a lot of resentment, towards my father, literally until my 40s. So I'm hopeful as the conversations we go, if there is any residual resentment, let's get it out. If we need to do it on this podcast, let's do it. But no, I appreciate you sharing that. When did you start to see a shift or a change in our relationship and how I showed up?
I mean, post-divorce, after we were, all set up and had the two houses in the schedule, you started showing up more, started going and doing more things and having more experiences and being more involved. And the circle of trust, the initial, I don't know if you want to share that story.
No, you actually, I will fill in the gaps. Yeah, we established this circle of trust. What's the circle of trust from your perspective?
Just full transparency that there's, not necessarily a right or wrong. It's just, I don't know, we're open to share and nobody's gonna get in trouble for sharing something that happened or is going, just anything in our lives.
Yeah. So when Dominic's mom and I were going through the divorce, there were a lot of things that were being said. The community and different things were happening. It was creating a lot of chaos and, and a lot of emotional strife, if you will. And, so actually I'm going to share this. I'm going to remember. Yeah, this is where it started. Let's go to the beginning of this. So, I was raised LDS and, had left the LDS church when, probably within a year before we started the divorce proceedings. And, and I, had started drinking a little bit and was, kind of stepping my toe into that. And at the time I was hiding all the alcohol I had in my house. I just had a Christmas party. There was alcohol hidden everywhere. And I came home and I noticed that you were cooking cookies in a frying pan. So your friends were there. And I literally, the first thing I said to myself, I'm like, oh shit, he found the alcohol. You remember this. And then you came upstairs, or I went to find you, and I'm like, hey, why are you cooking cookies in a frying pan? He goes, I couldn't find a cookie sheet. And then you looked at me with this big smile and you're like, so you still going to tell me you don't drink? And I go, well, the truth is, Dominic, I haven't drank in the first 40 years of my life. And then you smiled even bigger and you're like, but you're over 40. Yeah. And then at that moment, you're like, Dad, I don't care. I'm like, I know you don't care. I'm like, this is a pivotal moment in our relationship that we're going to have together with you and your brothers, is we're going to create the circle of trust. Stealing the line from Meet the Fockers. And our circle of trust really is, and our agreement was that we will always be honest. We will always be transparent. We will tell the truth, and that you or your brothers will never get in trouble for telling the truth, no matter what happens. Now, there's always consequences, for everything, positive and negative. But then, but you're always going to be, it's safe to share whatever, right? And do you remember the first time what happened when we actually implemented the circle of trust? What happened?
Yeah. Would you like me to share?
Yes, that's why I'm asking.
All right, well, let's set the stage. You told me go for it. I think I was driving a Jeep at the time. The Jeep was out of commission, and you said, yep, you can use my truck for the night. So I went out and I was hanging out with the girl, and then you called me like, I need my truck back. And It's like, I'm in and out with my friends because I was, I don't know, whatever, nervous to tell you that. And then you ended up catching me in my lie. I went and took the truck back. Yeah, I don't know. You can elaborate more from your perspective.
No, but that's what it was. And I'm like, wait a minute. I don't care if you're with a girl or whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter. It's just like, but the fact that you lied and we brought it back, I'm like, circle of trust, circle of trust. And there's been moments where you've checked me, I've checked you. And I think, I've talked a lot about this from being a dad. And I believe, like, as parents, the more transparent we can be, the better. And also, I feel like it's important for parents to be able to create safety, right? So you can share all the things, because teenagers, especially teenage boys, I mean, there's a lot of things that go on, whether it's making out with girls, whether all the different, girls, drugs, alcohol, all the, we'll call temptations in quotation marks, or just life, right? And being able to talk through that. And I've also found is we have expanded that and continue to expand that, many of your friends and your brother's friends would open up and share things because we created that safety, and I'd have conversations with them and they would never share any of these things with their parents, right? From your perspective as a son, looking at your friends that don't want to share with other parents versus what you're able to share, I mean, from your perspective, why do you feel like they can't share things with their parents?
Their approach and the way they, I don't know, everything is so do it this way or you're wrong, you're gonna get in trouble, you're gonna get grounded, and just helicopter parents. I mean, not all my friends, I'm just thinking in general. I don't know, and just the way that you've shown up with our friends, it's as a friend, but also as another father figure where you're here to support and help, and also where you've opened up the circle of trust to everybody as well, where what they do share to you, whatever, I mean, if it's said there or happens there, it stays there.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I don't think that's always the case. I've seen some instances where you share something and then all of a sudden it opens it up to the whole community of parents. So,
yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that you've honored to us and our friends that, yep, if it's said to you, it's not going anywhere else.
And do you still today feel safe sharing anything?
With you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you know quite a bit about me. So. Yeah.
We won't share all of it on here, but the reality is, like, even as a father, it's really important to me. And what's interesting too is because, like, this is another thing I want to talk about. I feel like one of the big shifts with me as a dad is I used to ride your ass for everything. Just the basic stuff, like, hey, we're leaving in 10 minutes, or hey, if you don't get this, then else. And I'd always threaten. And I was kind of an asshole. Is that fair?
Yeah, in some instances, yeah.
Yeah. And again, I'd get so upset about certain things because from my perspective, you weren't respecting me. You weren't honoring what I was saying. And of course, there's a balance between both of those, but there's also power in the delivery. And I just think I was a dick. And again, not intentionally, I was just projecting all of my stuff onto you, which again, I apologize for that.
There's no invitation.
We're going to get into the invitation thing in a minute. It's already one of the things I wanted to talk about. So I just feel like that was one of the big shifts that happened. And again, it happened with me, but I think you guys started to respect it. And what's fascinating about that, the less I was trying to parent that way, the more and more I practiced that, the more you completed and followed through on things anyway. So it's kind of a win-win because I wasn't coming at you so hot. It wasn't like, do this or else. Or this, a lot of parents will do this idle threat where you better do this, or you can't have this, or you can't do this. And I feel like I've, for the most part, gotten completely away from that. I'll use it every once in a while with your younger brothers, and it doesn't work. So I don't even,
I don't know. And this is just, I like the reward system better. If you do this, then you get this.
Yeah, I like that.
So,
what's a reward right now you'd like to work for?
From you? I don't know. I have lots of goals and lots of things that I want, or lots of things that I will have and experiences, and it's not, that I will receive from completing my daily practices. So
I love that. This man is as driven as, frankly, as anyone I know. And one of the things I love about our relationship is he's one of my greatest teachers. He's probably the greatest accountability partner I have in my life. He lives with me full time, and he checks my ass left and right constantly. And I've asked for it. And the reality is, like, a big thing for me is integrity. I want to follow through on my word with something as simple as, hey, I'm going to take the garbage out, or I'll do the dishes, or whatever, basic stuff. And when I say something, there is one person that will hold me accountable to it. I mean, constantly. And many times, most of the time, I'm good with it. Your delivery sucks sometimes. You come in really hot, and then I react to it. And then again, if I'm reacting, that's my own emotion. And more often than not, it's just you showing to me what I'm not doing, or not how I'm not showing up, which again is my own trigger. And I'm getting better and better about doing that, which I appreciate. And I appreciate your candor. I appreciate the directness. Like I used to be someone that used to, hate confrontation, not speak my mind. And one of the things I've loved about you, and I think this is just you, I call it the Latin effect. You just say it. Your Uncle Zach's the same way. He just speaks his truth, and it's like, whoo. But it's freeing and just being honest and just being truthful. And you could use some work on your delivery, but I feel like you're getting better about kind of navigating through that. And I think what you're demonstrating to others, especially your brothers, it's like, speak your mind, speak your truth. Don't make excuses. I want to talk about that for a minute, because you have a whole thing around people that make excuses. Expand on that. Like, when you see people say why they're not where they want to be, or they're talking about all these things in life that are happening to them, or the reasons why they aren't where they want to be, you actually take major issue with that. It bothers you.
Well, yeah, 95% of the time that someone's saying like, "Oh, I didn't get this because of this," it's an excuse, and it's something that they have control over, and you're using that excuse to make you feel better about not hitting what you wanted to. When in reality, it's like, okay, I need to make an adjustment. Let's change what I'm doing. Let's look at the problem and work backwards and say, okay, if I want to hit this or do this, I need to do X, Y, Z all the time. Just take full accountability for whatever the situation is. If you give me an example, I can.
Oh, you kind of nailed it. I mean, anytime, we had a conversation last night. I'm trying to decide if I even want to go here right now, but actually I'm not. No. So I feel like actually I'll bring this up, and I appreciate it, because at the end of the day, we're right. So I feel like there's a balance between calling it a spade, and then also having empathy or sympathy for where certain people are out. So, you were right alongside of me losing, the pain of everything, of losing my business, and just the pain and anguish of me going through that for several years. I mean, you had a front row seat to it, and you got to experience it. You saw your dad that had done all these things, all of a sudden going from there to, basically, not basically, starting over, going through some pretty deep, dark moments. And, as I was coming back on the other side of that, I would try to explain to you where I was feeling, and you're like, and I could tell you were getting frustrated, because it's like, come on, Dad, you got to meet your potential. And there are a couple moments you're like, you're just making an excuse. And I remember feeling like, he doesn't get it, which the reality is, like, until you've experienced some of these things, you don't truly know. But at the end of the day, if I can peel my emotions back, my ego back, the reality is, like, you're right. And I have found, and you've been a great example for me in this, is like, I can stay stuck in an old story. I can stay stuck in the past, and staying stuck there keeps you frozen. It becomes part of your identity. And that's the last thing I want. And I think for any of us, the past is the past. It's happened. And there's so many people that get caught up in things that have happened, weeks, months, years, decades, and can't seem to move forward. And so I just want to say, like, I honor, like, your candor, your directness, even though my reaction was shitty sometimes, or I might have kind of came at you. One of the things that's beautiful about our relationship is, like, we'll go at each other. It's like, yes, it's a father-son, but it's really peer-to-peer in many ways. And, but we always seem to work through it. And one thing I love about you too is, like, your initial reaction is usually defensiveness, and it's like, nope. And then you sit with it, and then you come back later. Sometimes you're, like, more resolute in your opinion, or you're like, you know what, I appreciate that. When I challenge you in the way you think or see things, like, what does that feel like? Do you appreciate that?
Yeah, I like challenging conversations, and I want my opinion to be challenged, because I want to be able to then solve it for myself, to say, yep, that's correct. Because I've had multiple instances, even just conversations with myself, where I have maybe two opinions that I feel very, very strong about, and then I go down a conversation road where they can contradict each other, and then it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, where does it matter, and what are my values, and then just coming back to what I value and working outside of that. But I don't know. I like sharing how I view things. I think in a lot of ways it's correct, and it's probably arrogant to some people. So I don't know. And with that, there's space for always learning, and I'm not the very best I can be. I mean, lots and lots of room to meet my full potential. So yes, I do like that my ideas are challenged, and then maybe we can come to like just collaborate on whatever the topic is.
Do you feel okay being wrong?
Well, yeah, how can you can't be right without being wrong.
Ooh, expand. What does that mean?
I mean, how many times do you have to fail before you're right? Like, I mean, sometimes you're just right off the go, but to be truly correct in a lot of areas, it involves trial and error to figure out what works best and what's the most efficient path or the most efficient answer in whatever it is. And I mean, whether it's values or a way to solve a problem.
So, one of the things that you value is your health. Like, and one of the things I love about you too is, you went to ASU, Arizona State, right? Did the high school, went to college, had the college scene, right? You experimented, partied, got involved in that scene, and many people kind of get stuck in that and stay there. But you consciously chose like, this isn't for me. Like, what shifted? What happened? Like, why? How did you get to that place?
Well, it was, I don't know. I mean, out of high school, I didn't really have a plan. I had applied to certain places. It was a little weird with COVID. I mean, as far as what was going on, I didn't want to go to certain areas, so I chose to go to Arizona. I mean, without even visiting, went down there, joined a fraternity, met people, and I mean, lived in the dorms. I lived in the GLV, the frat house there. Ended up living in a house with a few guys, and I just got to a point where like I still know, and I always know that like where I'm going is great, and it was just kind of a wake up. I'm like, okay, none of this is in alignment with my long term goals. So you either change it or move or leave. So I realized that my environment, wasn't in alignment, so I chose to leave.
Yeah, but you consciously chose that, which again is rare for someone in their early 20s just to like, you know what, I don't want to do this. I'm going to shift when all of your friends at the time, right? And people are just, living for the weekend and school, but partying and doing all the things, which
It's
is
the weekend every day.
yeah. And so, but yet you consciously chose, you're like, I don't want this. And I honored that. Like, I love that about you. You're one of your good friends who I call my godson, Luke Marshall, and your relationship's so fun. Cause like right now, I mean, this man is so dedicated in his career. He's crushing it. I mean, this guy's going places. Remember this guy. And I'm not just saying that cause I'm his dad, but there's one man in this world that can get you like out of your, we'll call it comfort zone, or get you like, put the play hat on for a minute, and I just love the relationship you have. And even him, Luke the other day was talking to your brother and saying, he's like, Dom's a good thing for me and I'm good for him. And like, just the balance of that. And I just, you've had really good people in your life. What do you think is the, other men that are, young men that are in their early 20s, right? Kind of doing their thing. What do you see that while it's very rare, if you will, for this to be in a very focus driven state where you're at? Because you don't have a lot of people. I mean, there are men out there that are that way at a young age, but you don't see a lot of that. Why is that, do you think?
Say doubt, fear, uncertainty, and the idea that it will all work itself out. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't take control of the situation, no one's coming to save you. You're gonna stay where you're at. So I've been able to create a mindset where my worst case scenario is that it takes me longer than I want. Like I know, and there's refinement that can happen in all areas, but I know what I want and I know I'm going to get there. It's just putting myself in the position to be able to do so, and not many people. And to me, my goal, I have a lot of monetary goals. So that involves putting myself in a position where the sky's the limit. And that also means that there's no floor. And I think that a lot of people aren't willing to put themselves in that position where there's uncertainty. And the truth is, if you put yourself on that, that's where you can explode, because you can take full control of the situation and you get paid for the amount of effort that you put in.
Are you comfortable being uncomfortable?
Yeah, you have to be.
Well, a lot of people are uncomfortable and they choose not to. I mean, again, it's a choice. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. The reality is most people aren't, right? But you choose when you get uncomfortable. Like, what goes through your mind when you're uncomfortable? Or you're like, you see a challenge. I mean, are you almost like, hell yeah, let's go? Or you're just like, oh shit, deer in headlights? Or maybe a little of both.
It can be both. Every once in a while, I'll catch myself. Then you start to fill into the uncertainty and you buy into it. When in reality, if you can take a step back and laugh about it, it's like, okay, all this is a puzzle or a problem that needs to be solved. And if you solve it, you'll get this reward.
So one of the things I talk openly about this and on social, my podcast, is around plant medicine. And, specifically with ayahuasca. And, I was first introduced to plant medicine probably 6-7 years ago. It's a big part of my life. I mean, in many ways, it's saved my life. It's given me direction. I mean, the list goes on and on of the benefits, that I've experienced in that. And I've been very open with you over the years with this, and have always extended an invitation once you were an adult, right? If you feel called to it, you're ready. And I remember once you turned 18, I'm like, you feeling ready? And you're like, nope. But then as you were, before you move back, here to Utah and you're in ASU, you reached out and you're like, okay, I think I'm ready, right? And I think, what was it, almost 2 years ago, you sat with ayahuasca the first time. And from my perspective, the growth and the acceleration of your life, you are on a trajectory for someone as young as you are, in many ways, light years ahead of most men your age, and in many ways ahead of men that are, frankly, my age. Tell me about, what that ayahuasca has been for you, a little bit about your experience and how you feel like that's actually helped you and guided you to where you are today.
Well, for me, ayahuasca, it's medicine. It's pure accountability. So I'm a big fan of placing myself in winning positions. So if there's a greater chance for loss, I do what I can to avoid it. I'll go place myself where I can win. What I like about, and where winning's the only option. What I like about medicine is you go and you sit there and you take the cup and there's no other option. You're there. You showed up. So you're there to do the work. And that's something that I've had some ceremonies where I've sat and I've laughed, and you get in, I don't know, just the pure uncomfort, and you start laughing about it and understanding that there's so much work on self-reflection, dealing with certain types of emotions, seeing all the highs and the lows, all embodied in one. For me, it's built lots and lots of confidence in myself in the process, and trusting me to create my own life and to create everything. I believe that everything in my life is a result of an action that I've taken. So yeah, it's been very positive, very beneficial. Helps refine and create alignment around long-term goals, around who I am and who I'm becoming. Be my best answer.
No, that's a great answer. I love that you said it's just you and you, because when people ask me about it, to me, when you're in ayahuasca, specifically in plant medicine, it basically, what happens is it takes your subconscious, your conscious, and the divine, whatever, God, the universe is to you, and puts everything in alignment, and then rips away every story we tell ourselves. So I love what you said. It's like, it's just you and you. And sometimes when you have to face yourself, which I frankly feel is the hardest person we have ever faced, will face, and currently face, is ourselves. There's no running. There's no story that, we can tell ourselves why this hasn't happened, or this is why, or whatever it happens to be. There is no running. And in that, you're right. It can be uncomfortable, super uncomfortable. And yet it can be freeing and it's exciting. And when you can start to play with, when you can take those experiences we've had in medicine and then apply them into daily life, the integration of the experience, that's where magic happens. And much of where we're at, which I love the way you're communicating, you're like, listen, no one's coming to save me. I'm the creator of my life. I am where I am today because of actions you're saying that you have made, right? That's empowering, And again, regardless of your spiritual or religious belief, I believe the universe, God, if, we were both raised Mormon and teach that God is a heavenly father. So with that assumption that God is a fatherly figure, me as a dad, I want you to be fully independent and have the power to do anything or be who you want. And so why would God not want the same for you, me, and everybody else? And plant medicine is an incredible tool to get you there. Much of it's also clearing out stories, trauma, limiting beliefs. We've had the opportunity to sit together. I hosted a retreat last year in Costa Rica that you and your brother Cole was there. And it was it's a beautiful experience for Dominic at, in his early 20s, doing a lot of the work, the inner work that myself and many others that have been introduced to this are doing, in their mid 40s or late 30s, and we have a lot more trauma. We have a lot more stuff to work through. And the reality is like, and not that you don't, but you've got a lot of clearing and things. I mean, it is putting you on a trajectory that I know is unstoppable, right? And the only limitations you're ever going to hit are those that you set upon yourself, So one of the things I will share, the first time that, the Dominic sat, if you remember, I told you, I'm like, you know what? There might be some things that come up with how I, raise. I'm like, I'm here for it because I've had to work through a lot of it. I believe we all have mom and dad issues. It's not a bad thing. It's just, it is. And I truly believe most parents, 99.9% of them never intend to hurt or to do anything that's going to create trauma. But the reality is we all have it. And it was such a beautiful bonding moment for me. I think it was the first night or the second night, and you're like, well, some things came up, and then we got to talk through that and hold space for that. And I was able to just, again, hear you hold space. And I believe like from that experience and going on, we've been able to work through a lot of some of the old stuff that's there or was there in the years past, right? And plant medicine is a beautiful tool to be able to do that. So I appreciate and thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do you and you have a lot of friends, right, that have are curious and interested, but they're scared, right? There's some fear associated with it. And you mentioned fear earlier. I mean, do you feel that that's probably the number one thing that holds people back?
Yeah, I'd say so. Just from what I've seen, fear or self-doubt.
What scares you?
I'd say my biggest fear is not hitting my goals or not getting to what I want to, and the only way to overcome that is to hit them and to do the work. So I'd say that's probably what mine is.
So how do you do when something doesn't go your way?
Deal with it. That's what the situation is.
So how do you deal with it?
Well, it's just a thought process. You can sit there and be frustrated about it, and I can choose to be all frustrated about the situation or what happened, or I can just take a deep breath, move past it, and continue working and work on whatever the next thing is, or figure out another way to solve whatever the issue is, or take my lesson learned. This happened, and out of that, I can self-reflect and be like, oh, okay, well, that happened because of this, and that happened because of this. If I would have done this, I could have avoided that problem. So next time in the future, if I notice clues that something's coming up, I'm going to make a quick adjustment. So I only have to learn once and not twice.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself getting caught up in past things or beating yourself up for stuff from the past?
Maybe not beating myself up. Every once in a while, there are a few things that have circled back to me that maybe linger longer than I would like. And truth is, maybe there's more exploration there. Maybe there's more lessons to be learned that I haven't uncovered. Or maybe it's just a reminder that to take care of what needs to be taken care of so I don't run into that situation again.
So one of the things that I'm inspired by you, and I feel like we as a family, especially you and I here, part of it's an age thing, but is really our daily habits and daily routines. So what are some non-negotiables that you do on a daily basis?
The gym, for sure. Cold plunge and sauna. And I'm like 90% of the way there with the sauna.
You're like, what, 99% there basically with the cold plunge?
Yeah. I mean, I've done one, in the last it was January 5th, 2024. I decided I was going to do one every day. I missed, I think, three to 4 days being here, and then other days that out of town. But besides that, every single day, done one. I can't remember the last time I missed.
What does the cold plunge do for you?
Well, I never want to do it. It's putting myself in a position where it's uncomfortable and just getting it done. Every time after, I feel great. I feel amazing. There's all the health benefits of it and the dopamine release. I mean, I could go into all of that. I truthfully, I couldn't bullet point everything on there.
Just for you, right? I mean, obviously the list goes on, both emotionally, mentally, physically, the benefits of it. But for you, that's what I'm asking. Like,
Because I told myself I was going to do it, so I do it. That's what I like. It's something that's uncomfortable. I'm willingly doing something that I don't ever really look forward to doing. The truth is the hardest part's getting in. Once you're in there, it's easy. You can sit in there for however long.
oh yeah, there's moments where, I go out there and I literally am talking myself into it. Or there was literally a morning here, literally in the last couple of weeks, I paced outside in the snow for 10 minutes trying to talk myself to get into it. And then I just started laughing. And then I got in. I'm like, this is actually feels warmer than standing outside.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the hardest. Well, and that relates to a lot of things. The hardest part's starting once you do. So I'm roofing. I'm in roofing sales. I help people through insurance get the roofs covered. Knocking doors is how I started. I have a team I'm building. The truth is, anyone who's knocked doors, the first ones that you go and do, it's maybe a little nerve wracking, but once you do it, it's, I'm here. I'm not leaving. I don't pull up to the gym parking lot and turn around and drive home. Show up. I'm going to do it. I'm going to complete the task, and then I'll move on to the next.
Because if you did, you wouldn't feel good, right?
A good day for me is a productive day. And if I don't follow through on the stuff that I want to do, that will eat at me way harder than the burden of doing the work.
Yeah, and I love that you've embodied that and have that as really a core value for a 22-year-old that just sees life that way, And it's like, again, a lot of us are rooted, basically the truth is like our subconscious, we are programmed to avoid uncomfortableness. We are programmed to avoid what scares us. And the tagline of, burn up here, it's like freedom's in the fire. Mm-hmm. And I love that when you throw that back at me when I'm having a thing, you're like, freedom's in the fire. And I really can't say anything about it. Like there was a moment, when was it, last year sometime, where I was going to back out of something. And you're like, oh, what, just because it's hard, or, you're not going to do it? You're not going to do it. And I just remember I had, I might have used a couple profanities, and then we both started laughing. It's like, all right, I'll be there, Yeah. And I appreciate it because at the end of the day, it was just a story, and everything's tied to a story. And the thing I love about you is like you work and you kind of have your own way of going through things, but you continue to lean into the uncomfortable. And as you've done that, and from my perspective and what I've watched, and I hope you know this, is like physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, significant changes in you as you continue to lean into what is quote unquote hard, which I honor. So what's in store for Dominic? What can we expect to see what you're going to create here in the coming year or two?
We'll see. But my focus right now is around roofing. I'm building a team here in Utah. By the end of this year, I'll have more than 10 reps. We'll see. Lots of big goals that I'd like to hit, mainly around revenue, team building, and with that, learning the skills that I'll then be able to go and transfer to when I create my own businesses.
Yeah, I love it. As we kind of wrap up here, I want to share one story, and I've shared this before, but just with you here, and I probably will get emotional, but we started the podcast talking about just, again, pre-divorce, my own insecurities and lack of self-worth and self-love, and projecting that onto you. And again, I really wanted to make a conscious effort, going through the divorce and showing up, because I didn't want to show up that way. And, we had gone on a family trip, to Cancun, when your mom and I were married. Went to one of the water parks there, and again, I'm morbidly overweight, obese, and I did, self-conscious, didn't want to take my shirt on. I felt like shit, and I didn't participate really in anything that day, and did not want to swim, didn't want to take my shirt off. I'm just basically a mugwump, just wah, right? The fat guy over there that doesn't want to participate, and what was interesting, a few years later, we went back, and I'm working on getting in shape, and we had a riot. And your brother, Kingston, who has his own Latin effect, no filter. And, throughout the entire day, he's pointing out, hey, Dad, that's the lawn chair you fell asleep in. Hey, Dad, that's the table you watched us do this. I mean, he just kept pointing out everything that I didn't do the few years I was there before. And I'm having a whole thing around it. And grateful for where we are, where our relationship is today, but then having, feeling guilt and shame around not being able to show up for you guys. And, on the way home,
in our taxi back to the hotel, if you recall, I mean, I broke down. I started crying, and I'm like, I am so sorry for how I used to show up. And you looked at me and you said, but that's not who you are today. And I will never forget that, because it was just like, I see you, Dad, like, and you are showing up, and our relationship has flourished and will continue to flourish. And because you and your brothers matter to me as much as anything, and much of why I'm doing this and what I want to do with helping other men and being the best versions of themselves is also how they show up as a father. And I feel like, as we've worked through those uncomfortable situations and continue to have uncomfortable conversations, and you and I continue to lean in, right? It actually brings us closer. It helps us be better men. And my biggest takeaways I've talked that we have been able to embody, and my, parting message here for all the fathers out there is, get real, get vulnerable, like show your sons all the sides of you. I mean, when I was losing my company, going through all this stuff, I mean, there are many times where I'm just sobbing in front of my kids. I think I saw my dad cry, I could count on one or two hands. You probably have seen it, 100 times. And it's been great to create the safety. And then also to like, I'm not perfect and I'm figuring this stuff out. I mean, I don't care how many parenting books you read. You don't know until you do it, right? Knowledge is based off experience. And I just honor you so much in the grace and the acceptance and the unconditional love that I have felt from you and your brothers. And I just want you to know, I'm so proud of you. Like, I'm so proud of you. And I look up to you. I honor you. And I don't say that lightly. Like, you are in the process of building an empire, and you're also in the process of showing other men your age and frankly older to take radical accountability, to be the best version of yourselves. No one's coming to save any one of us. We have to save ourselves. And you continue to lean in, and I honor the hell out of it. And anyway, I'm just so grateful for you. I'm grateful for you taking the time to come on me. I didn't have to coerce him too much to come on the podcast, but nevertheless, thank you, Dominic, for being my son, for being a guest today, and for who you are as a man.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad. I'm proud of you too.
Yeah.
Love you.
I love you too. Yeah. Thank you for joining us on the Burn Up Podcast. We'll see you next time.